It's 7:30 p.m. across India, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll get you the top stories from India and the region. I am Anil Thomas. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in Washington, D.C., Kate Fisher. Good evening from New Delhi, Kate.
And good morning from Washington, Anil. It's 10 a.m. here and 3 o'clock in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we go live to the US city of Baltimore, where 2 bodies have been retrieved from the river after a massive cargo ship brought down a bridge. And the founder of bankrupt crypto exchange FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, is set to receive his sentence for fraud in a New York court, and he could face decades in jail. That's all after the rest of the headlines from Anil in Delhi.
India dismisses China's claims on Arunachal Pradesh as baseless. New Delhi says the northeastern state is an integral and inalienable part of India. Russia conducts airstrikes on Kyiv. Ukraine's air defense response calls for more Patriot air defense systems to battle a surge in missile strikes. Search continues for 4 other people missing after 2 bodies found in a submerged truck. Supply chain concerns rise after Baltimore ship crash. And dethroned crypto king Sam Bankman-Fried set to be sentenced for defrauding FTX investors. World's most popular platform for trading digital currency went bankrupt in 2022. Well, India on Thursday termed China's claims over Arunachal Pradesh as baseless. Addressing a press conference, spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs, S Jaishankar, said that India has time and again made its position clear and issued statements. He stressed that Arunachal will remain an integral part of India.
China may repeat its baseless claims as many times as they want. That is not going to change our position. Arunachal Pradesh was, is and will remain and always remain an integral and inalienable part of India.
Meanwhile, the Indian Ministry of Home Affairs on Thursday extended the Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1958 in 3 districts and the areas falling under the jurisdiction of 3 police stations in another district of Arunachal Pradesh for a period of 6 months. With this, the areas have been declared as disturbed areas with effect from the 1st of April 2024, unless withdrawn earlier. This step has been taken after review of the security of these districts of Arunachal Pradesh. MEA spokesperson also reiterated India's position on Ukraine, saying resolution must be reached through dialogue and diplomacy, and warring sides must be open to explore all ways to establish peace.
Our position is very clear on peace initiatives and how we look at the Ukraine-Russia conflict. We continue to encourage peaceful resolution of the conflict through dialogue and diplomacy, and remain open to engaging all ways and means that would help achieve this objective.
Well, Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Minister laid a wreath at Rajghat in India's capital, New Delhi, to pay homage to Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation. On Friday, the Ukrainian minister will hold talks with India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S Jaishankar and Deputy National Security Advisor Vikram Misri. He will also engage with members of the business community. Ahead of his visit, Minister Kuleba said that Ukraine sees India as an important global power.
The aim of this visit is to strengthen the Ukrainian-Indian relationship Ukraine sees India as an important global power with a powerful international voice. We are confident that close cooperation will benefit both our nations.
He also welcomed India's participation in the reconstruction of Ukraine.
India is welcome to cooperate, to engage with Ukraine on economic projects now, and of course to engage in the reconstruction of Ukraine.
Well, moving on, Moscow claims to have launched strikes on targets including the storage points of Ukrainian drones. While Ukraine claims it has repelled multiple Russian offensives and launched airstrikes on Russian positions. The Ukrainian army attacked Russian military personnel and military equipment, hitting important targets such as the Russian air defense systems. Following the attack, Ukraine asked Western allies for air defense supplies at an extraordinary meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council. Russia last Friday conducted its largest airstrike on Ukraine's energy system since the conflict started in February 2022, damaging power units at a major dam and causing blackouts for more than 1 million people in a number of regions. Following a spat of missile attacks, Kyiv is tightening security in the capital area. Head of Kyiv's military administration said a city defense council would review the staging of public events and enhance security around large gatherings. The measures come as Russia launched several missile attacks on Ukraine. Putin meanwhile says that Russia will not attack NATO, but F-16s will be shot down in Ukraine. Kate Fisher is in Washington, D.C. and gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Kate, the F-16s, are they sitting ducks for Russian MiG-31s? And how do you see this pan out? Russia warning of consequences there.
Well, amidst reports of the West supplying F-16 fighters to Ukraine, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has said that they will be shot down by Russian forces if used. Speaking to the Russian Air Force pilots, Putin said that the US-led military alliance had expanded eastwards towards Russia ever since the 1991 fall of the Soviet Union, but that Moscow had no plans to attack a NATO member. The Kremlin accuses the US of fighting against Russia by supporting Ukraine with money, weapons and intelligence. It also says that relations with the US have probably never been worse. Here in the US, federal authorities have begun the task of investigating what went wrong aboard the cargo ship Dali that led to a catastrophic collapse of Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge. The bodies of 2 of the 6 people missing after the US bridge collapse in Baltimore have been recovered from the Patapsco River. US President Joe Biden's promised to visit the city soon, and he said that the federal government will pay to rebuild the bridge.
So dock workers were reporting that there were power outages on the ship during cargo operations. And the question becomes, okay, what's the underlying cause of that? Was it something, small? Was it rectified? We don't know. But, that's an indication of problems with the vessel. And that should have been communicated to the pilots who are Chesapeake Bay pilots.
Well, let's go live now to Baltimore, where DD India's Sally Patterson has been reporting. She joins us live. Sally, what is the latest in this investigation? What more can you tell us?
Well, Kate, we've now heard from the National Transport Safety Board, who's given us some more information about exactly what was on that ship that remains stuck behind me under the Baltimore Key Bridge. What they say is that actually there were several containers full of hazardous material on board that ship when it collided with the bridge, and some of that actually spilled into the water, and they say there was a sheen on the waterways. They're still investigating what effect that might have, but in the meantime, they're having to take extra care when starting to look at how they're going to move that ship out of the way of other ships trying to get through into the port. We know that the investigation could take up to 2 years now. That's what the chair told us in a press conference. This isn't the first time they've looked at a situation like this, so they say they know what they're doing. But they said they're not going to speculate, they're not going to come to conclusions whilst the investigation is ongoing and whilst they're at the scene. Now, interviews are expected to take place with the crew members who were on board. That's 2 pilots and the remaining crew as well, to try and find out what led up to that collision. We know that the lights flickered moments before the collision took place. But before that, the ship was able to make a mayday call, and that allowed local police to stop traffic from getting onto the bridge, and that, the mayor and other authorities here say, inevitably saved many lives. Unfortunately, though, there were at least 8 people on the bridge at the time of the collision. 2 of them were pulled to safety soon after the incident, but 6 others are presumed dead, and we have been seeing their bodies begin to be pulled from the river itself. However, divers have had to pause their investigations underwater because of conditions here. They say that it's full of metal and concrete, which just makes it simply too dangerous to continue to investigate what's going on. Now, the other major situation here is the fact that, as I say, that port is still blocked, at least by sea. Trucks and vans are able to get in and out by road, but no cargo is being pulled in from abroad to the port here, and that's leading to disruption for shippers, for supply chains here in the US, and actually could have global impacts as well. Something to note is that coal is one of the major exports from the port of Baltimore, and India is one of the key receivers of that coal. So there could be impacts, at least in the short term, of how it's able to be delivered. Cars and sugar are other key exports from the port here. So we're looking to see if the government is going to take steps to try and mitigate some of those potential disruptions. Other ports in the area are stepping in to try and help, but it could take months or even years until things are back to normal here in Baltimore.
Sally Patterson, thank you very much there on the Patapsco River in the city of Baltimore. Well, the founder of now bankrupt crypto exchange FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, is set to receive his sentencing today in a Manhattan federal court. Sam Bankman-Fried was convicted in November 2023 of stealing $8 billion from FTX customers. He faces a maximum of 110 years in prison, but will likely receive less. Prosecutors are seeking a sentence of 40 to 50 years for what they say was one of the biggest financial frauds in American history. President Joe Biden will be joined by his Democratic presidential predecessors, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, on Thursday at a fundraiser in New York. Joe Biden and the 2 former presidents will take part in a discussion which will be moderated by The Late Show host Stephen Colbert. According to Biden's re-election campaign, the fundraiser could be the most successful in political history. The event is slated to raise more than $25 million. Israel has asked the US to reschedule a high-level meeting on military plans for Gaza's southern city of Rafa. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had previously cancelled the visit after the US did not veto a Gaza ceasefire resolution that was adopted by the United Nations Security Council on the 25th of March.
The Prime Minister's office has agreed to reschedule the meeting dedicated to Rafa. So we're now working with them to find a convenient date that's obviously going to work for both sides. But his office has agreed to reschedule that meeting that would be dedicated to Rafa, which is a good thing.
Meanwhile, India's Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S Jaishankar, has said that the Palestinians have been denied their homeland. He reiterated India's support for a 2-state solution to address the Israel-Palestinian conflict. He made the remarks during his visit to Malaysia.
On the one hand, what happened on October 7th was terrorism. On the other hand, nobody would countenance the deaths of innocent civilians. Countries may be justified, at least in their own minds, in responding. But you cannot have a response which does not every response must take into account something called international humanitarian law. And the fact is that whatever the rights and wrongs of the issue, there is the underlying issue of the rights of the Palestinians and the fact that they have been denied their homeland.
Spain has rescued migrants stranded off the island of Gran Canaria on Thursday. According to officials, a total of 124 people were rescued. The EU border agency Frontex says that migrant arrivals have increased compared to the previous year through what is the busiest route for irregular migration. French President Emmanuel Macron has reacted sharply to the troubled talks over a free trade deal between the EU and South America's bloc, Mercosur. On the last day of his visit to Brazil, Macron called it a, quote, very bad deal that lacks proper climate considerations. He also said the deal's outdated and needs to be reworked. Brazil, for its part, has said that it's ready to sign the deal. France has repeatedly expressed reservations, saying that its farmers have objected to the prospect that it could allow in agricultural imports, notably beef, that does not meet EU standards. The deal is supposed to ease trade barriers between the EU and the South American bloc, despite growing opposition from France.
I deeply believe that we need to rethink our trade rules in light of this advantage, which is why I prefer to put my foot down in front of this assembly. I have spoken out very forcefully to say that Mercosur, as it is negotiated today, is a very bad agreement. But I think it's a very bad deal for you and for us.
Well, earlier, the two presidents launched a submarine built in Brazil with French technology in a programme that aims to build Brazil's first nuclear-powered submarine by the end of the decade. Presidents Emmanuel Macron and Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva attended a ceremony in a shipyard near Rio de Janeiro to launch the third diesel-powered submarine built in a $10 billion partnership. The submarine programme, which began in 2008 during Lula's previous presidential term, is a partnership with France's state-run naval group. DD India's Tony Waterman has sent us this report from Paris.
It's quite significant, Ollie, because this is an indication that the French President Emmanuel Macron is still open to this deal, that it can be renegotiated in his mind, because he has been one of the sharpest critics of this free trade agreement. His biggest gripe is that farmers here in France and across the EU are being asked to meet these very strict, very high standards when it comes to climate goals, to reduce their carbon emissions by quite a significant amount. But these farmers in this trade bloc coming from South America wouldn't have to adhere to the same type of rigid standards. So the fact that he's even saying that this is a bad deal for both parties, but we should still be working towards a deal, is pretty significant. This is a deal that's 23 years in the making. It was approved in principle back in 2019, but it's been held up in the final negotiating process and the final approval process for 5 years now. And of course, this issue with the Mercosur trade bloc, which not only includes Brazil, but also Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay, has become a central theme to these farmers' protests that we've seen across Europe for the last couple of months. Farmers are very concerned that these cheaper products are going to flood into the European market, and it's going to undercut their incomes, their livelihoods. And so this is something that they've been ferociously protesting against for months now. And again, the fact that the French president says, let's renegotiate this, he's still open to this deal, he's really seen as the big stumbling block in getting this approved.
DD India's Tony Waterman reporting for us from Paris. Well, that's it from me here in Washington for now. Back now to Anil in New Delhi.
Okay, thank you. Happy Holy Week wishes for all there in Washington. Well, still to come on DD India Global. India-China hold fresh round of diplomatic talks with no tangible breakthroughs. The Festival of Colours, or Holi, celebrated not just in India but across the globe.
लॉटरी लग गई।
अरे वाह, बधाई हो। तो अब तो ढेर सारी शॉपिंग।
हाँ दी, नया मोबाइल।
अरे रुको शहजादे, सैलरी से पहले खर्चे।
इंस्टेंट लोन भी तो मिलता है।
पहले बजट बनाना सीखो, फिर खर्च करो।
पर दी,
देखो, कमाई का एक हिस्सा हमेशा बचाना चाहिए, लेकिन पार्टी देने से नहीं बचोगे तुम।
हाँ दी, पार्टी मेरी, बजट तुम्हारा।
अच्छा।
आरबीआई कहता है,
सही वित्तीय बर्ताव करे आपका बचाव।
In a world that never stops, where information shapes.
You're watching DD India Global. I'm Anil Thomas. The 29th meeting of the Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination on the India-China border affairs was held on Wednesday in Beijing. The two sides had an in-depth exchange of views on how to achieve complete disengagement and resolve the remaining issues along the line of actual control in the western sector of India-China border areas. In the interim, both sides agreed to maintain regular contact through diplomatic and military channels and on the need to uphold peace and tranquility on the ground in the border areas in accordance with existing bilateral agreements and protocols. Commuting east for over 9 million people of South Korean capital as the hours-long bus strike ended on Thursday. The strike was called off after a deal was reached between Seoul's bus union and its employers to hike the wages by 4.4%. The unions had originally asked for almost 13% wage increase. The full-scale strike by the city bus drivers was the first in 12 years. Their last strike lasted around 20 minutes. A look at other stories making news around the world. Latvia marked the 20th anniversary of joining NATO on Thursday. The celebration saw a parade ceremony which had Admiral Rob Baer, the chair of the Alliance Military Committee, as a special guest. An electrical conductor rail fell off the track in Bangkok's Prawit district. This leads to suspension of the train service until midnight. Passengers were evacuated from the train safely. The incident caused damage to 3 vehicles with no reported injuries. Dozens of anti-mining protesters held a sit-in outside Ecuador's capital Quito as tensions continue over mining rights. The demonstration took place to oppose government's plans to pave the way for the mining of gold, silver and copper. Ecuador has been under a state of emergency since January to quell a wave of gang violence. Well, with the buzz of Holi, the festival of colours still fresh, students in Sri Lanka were seen celebrating with full fervour. In the neighbouring island of Sri Lanka, Holi was celebrated at the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Centre in Colombo. The celebrations witnessed participation by Sri Lankan students of the Indian Cultural Centre. People played with colours and greeted each other on the festive occasion. Well, colours transcend all boundaries. Well, that's it in this edition of DD India Global. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, Instagram. You can also find us online at ddindia.com. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Anil Thomas from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Global.